My entire world went up in flames. At the age of 65, I sought shelter with my son, only to be rejected due to his fiance's desire for privacy. In my desperation, I reached out to my first love, a man I hadn't encountered in 4 decades. When he opened the door to his opulent estate, his greeting was brief yet profound. "You've finally returned home." This encounter irrevocably altered the course of my life. Before we delve deeper, please ensure you're subscribed to the channel and share your current viewing location in the comments. We cherish knowing the reach of our narratives. My name is Grace, and at 65 years old, I genuinely believed I had weathered every hardship life could present. I was mistaken. It all began on an ordinary Wednesday in Charlotte, North Carolina. As I prepared my afternoon coffee in the kitchen, a peculiar odor permeated the air. Suspecting I might have left something on the stove, I went to investigate. Upon opening the living room door, I was engulfed by a dense, suffocating smoke, rendering visibility near impossible. Flames were already devouring the drapes, ascending the walls with alarming rapidity, a sight that rendered me momentarily frozen. The smoke alarm, which should have been blaring, had, as I later discovered, been rendered silent for months due to a depleted battery, a minor oversight with catastrophic consequences. I retreated to the kitchen, fumbling for my phone to contact emergency services. However, the pervasive smoke made breathing difficult and clear thinking impossible. The sound of shattering glass signaled an urgent need for escape. The fire's voracious appetite for my home was undeniable and seemed beyond control. My sole focus became survival. Grabbing my purse from the kitchen table, I fled through the back door. The last image seared into my memory before I plunged into the open air was the portrait of my late husband, Robert, beginning to char from the heat. Neighbors were already gathering on the street as I emerged, gasping for air. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a woman of 78 years, was the first to approach, embracing me as we both watched, helpless. The inferno consumed the dwelling I had called home for over 40 years. The fire department arrived within 10 minutes, but it was far too late. While they successfully prevented the fire from spreading to adjacent properties, my house was irrevocably lost. In a mere hour, 4 decades of cherished memories were reduced to cinders. The kitchen table where David had once completed his homework, the walls that bore the height markers of my son's growth, the bedroom I had shared with Robert for 37 years, all were gone. I stood on the sidewalk, swaddled in a blanket provided by a kind stranger, observing the firefighters' efforts. Later, I was informed that the likely cause was a short circuit in an aging living room electrical outlet, a simple malfunction that had reduced my existence to rubble. The flames eventually receded, leaving behind a smouldering, skeletal ruin. The fire chief, his face streaked with soot and his eyes conveying a pity I couldn't bear at that moment, approached me. "I'm so sorry, Mum. We did everything we could," he began, but no further explanation was necessary. The devastation was self-evident, a complete loss. Everything I owned apart from the clothes on my back and the contents of my purse had vanished. My neighbors, fortunate enough to retain their homes, offered me refuge for the initial night. Though the kind Mrs. Jenkins offered her small, already crowded apartment, the prospect of sleeping in a public gymnasium with strangers amplified my sense of desolation. It was then that I knew I had to contact David. My son resided approximately a 40-minute drive away in Valentine, an affluent Charlotte suburb characterized by tree-lined streets and picture-perfect residences. He had relocated there 4 years prior upon his promotion to regional manager at the insurance firm where he was employed. Our relationship was not particularly close, certainly not in the way mothers and sons ought to be, but he represented my sole remaining family. I borrowed Mrs. Jenkins's telephone as mine had been lost in the conflagration. "David, darling, it's Mum," I stated, my voice betraying a weakness I hadn't intended. "Mum, what's wrong? You sound distressed." "There was a fire, son. The house is gone. Everything is gone." A profound silence ensued, feeling like an eternity. "Are you injured?" "No, I'm fine. Just a few minor abrasions and a sore throat from the smoke. But I need a place to stay while I sort things out. Just temporarily." Another pause. "Sure, Mum. Come on over. We'll figure it out." The surge of relief that washed over me was so overwhelming I nearly succumbed. My son would provide for me. Despite our emotional distance, the missed calls, and the stilted holiday gatherings, he was still my child. The following morning, I found myself gazing at the charred remains of my home, awaiting the arrival of the insurance adjuster. He appeared precisely at 9 o'clock, a young man who seemed eager to be elsewhere, methodically documenting the remnants of my property with a clipboard and camera. "Total loss," he declared pragmatically, as if those two words didn't encapsulate my entire existence. "How much?" I inquired, bracing myself for the inevitable. "Well, you had a policy of approximately $200,000 on the structure, but factoring in your deductible and depreciation, we're likely looking at around $90,000, perhaps less. $90,000 to reconstruct 42 years of a life. It seemed unfathomable. With the emergency funds provided by the Red Cross, Mrs. Jenkins assisted me in purchasing essential clothing and toiletries. My entire worldly possessions now fit into a single, small borrowed suitcase. That was it, all that remained of the life I had painstakingly built. The drive to David's residence felt like a journey to an unfamiliar land. Everything appears different when you have no place to return to. Familiar landmarks, the gas station where I regularly purchase lottery tickets, the diner where Robert and I shared Sunday breakfasts, all seemed to belong to someone else's narrative. David's neighborhood was, as always, impeccably maintained. Pristine lawns, flawless sidewalks, and lives continuing undisturbed, as if the previous day had never occurred. I felt like an unwelcome intrusion, bringing my tragedy into their unblemished world. His home was a 2-story colonial, adorned with white shutters and a vibrant red door, a choice made by Victoria, his fiancée. I had met her precisely 3 times in the 2 years they had been a couple. She was 30 years old and he was 39. Employed at a marketing firm in the city centre, she possessed a strong opinion on every conceivable matter, from wall colours to the selection of wine for dinner. As I guided the taxi into their driveway, I paused for a moment, gathering my resolve. This is temporary, I reassured myself, just until I can determine my next steps, just until the insurance payout arrives and I can secure a modest apartment somewhere. I never envisioned that approaching my son's front door with my small, borrowed suitcase would prove to be one of the most arduous moments of my life. Yet as I raised my hand to knock, a familiar sense of dread washed over me, the same hollow feeling that had accompanied Robert's passing, as if the ground were vanishing beneath my feet. Little did I know then the depths to which I was about to descend. David opened the door before I could knock, as if he had been anticipating my arrival. For a fleeting instant, seeing his familiar face, Robert's eyes, my own resolute chin, I felt a flicker of hope that things might be all right. He was my son, my only child. Surely familial bonds held some significance. "Mum," he said, stepping aside to admit me, his voice carrying an undertone I couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps distance or discomfort. Victoria materialized behind him almost instantaneously, as if poised for her entrance. She wore white jeans and a silk blouse that likely cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her brown hair was artfully arranged in a seemingly effortless updo, and her smile, though polite, failed to reach her eyes. "Grace, how absolutely dreadful about your house," she offered, her gaze fixed not on me, but on my worn suitcase. David mentioned what occurred. I placed my suitcase down in their immaculate entryway, suddenly acutely aware of my disheveled appearance. My new attire, though clean, seemed incongruous against the polished marble flooring. The faint scent of smoke still clung to my hair, despite a shower at Mrs. Jenkins's. "It's just for a little while," I hastened to explain, "just until I can get back on my feet." David and Victoria exchanged a knowing glance, a silent marital communication that excluded any onlookers. I recognized that unspoken exchange, having shared it countless times with Robert, but from this vantage point, it felt like an exclusion from an unacknowledged fraternity. "Let's sit down and discuss this," David suggested, ushering me into the living room. Their home exuded a curated perfection, the kind found in lifestyle magazines. Every item was meticulously placed, no surface out of order. The white furnishings appeared untouched, and the glass coffee tables gleamed, reflecting light from windows so pristine they seemed invisible. It was a space that instilled a sense of trepidation, as if one were afraid to disturb its flawless presentation. I perched on the edge of the immaculate sofa, my new shoes planted firmly on the gleaming hardwood floor. Victoria registered this with a slight, almost imperceptible flinch. "So what's the plan?" David inquired, settling into an armchair opposite me, rather than beside me on the sofa, where a comforting gesture might have been offered, positioning us as if for a business negotiation. "Well, the insurance adjuster indicated it would take several weeks, perhaps a month, to process everything. I was hoping I could remain here until then, just until I secure a small apartment or something similar." The ensuing silence stretched uncomfortably for a beat too long. I observed a subtle shift in Victoria's demeanour, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She leaned forward, placing her hand on David's arm in a gesture that appeared supportive but was undeniably possessive. "Mom," David began, his tone signalling the impending delivery of heartbreaking news. "The thing is, Victoria and I have been discussing it, and we truly value our privacy here. We both have demanding jobs, and this is our sanctuary, if you understand what I mean." I blinked, struggling to grasp the implication. "I wouldn't be a hindrance, I'd keep to myself. I could assist with meals and cleaning. I wouldn't be a burden." Victoria leaned in, her voice soft yet resolute. "It's not about being a burden, Grace. It's about personal space. This house is our first home together, and we're still navigating our dynamic as a couple." "I'm his mother," I stated, the words escaping with more force than intended. "Of course you are," Victoria replied smoothly, "and that's precisely why we thought you might be more comfortable elsewhere, a place where you can maintain your independence as you rebuild." I looked to David, anticipating he would counter her assertion, that he would recall the countless nights I'd stayed awake tending to his fevers, the double shifts I'd worked to fund his university textbooks, the unwavering support I'd offered during his divorce 3 years prior when his wife left him for her personal trainer. Instead, he simply nodded. "Victoria is right, Mum. We believe you'd be happier with your own space." The impact of his words was visceral, akin to a physical blow. I felt a distinct constriction in my chest, as if my lungs were being squeezed. "Happier, David? I lost everything yesterday, everything, and you believe I'd be better off alone in a hotel room than here with my family?" "It doesn't have to be a hotel," Victoria interjected swiftly. "There are some lovely extended stay accommodations near the mall. They're quite clean and safe, and they even have small kitchenettes so you can prepare your own meals." I stared at this woman, who had been a part of my son's life for a mere 2 years, dictating where I should reside after the devastation of losing my home? And how precisely do you expect me to afford these delightful extended stay accommodations? The insurance funds won't be available for weeks. David shifted uncomfortably. I could assist with that, a few $100s to get you started. A few $100s? The phrase was delivered as if I were a distant acquaintance he barely knew, not the woman who brought him into existence. David, I murmured, my voice reduced to a whisper. I changed your diapers. I soothed you through colic. I taught you to ride your bicycle, and I helped you with your homework. I held you when you wept because Lucia Velasco broke your heart in high school. His expression flickered with a hint of distress, but Victoria tightened her grip on his arm. No one is questioning your history, she stated. We simply believe that everyone would be more comfortable with certain boundaries. Boundaries? I recognized that term from the therapist David had consulted following his divorce. Everything seemed to revolve around boundaries. You're essentially asking me to leave, I said plainly. We're not asking you to leave, David protested. We're just suggesting that perhaps this arrangement wouldn't be ideal for anyone involved. Whose idea was this? I inquired, though the answer was already evident. I could discern it from the way Victoria leaned back slightly, a subtle expression of triumph on her face, as if she had achieved a victory. We discussed it together, David responded, avoiding my gaze. I rose slowly, my knees protesting with a series of cracks that served as a stark reminder of my 65 years and my solitary predicament. I understand. Mum, please don't be like this. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? I repeated the phrase as if it were an alien concept. What would be best for everyone, David, is if your mother didn't have to face sleeping on the streets tonight. Victoria's perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of concern. You won't have to sleep on the streets. As I mentioned, there are options available. I cast a final glance around the impeccably appointed living room. I observed the framed family photographs featuring David and Victoria, devoid of any images of myself. I noted the expensive furnishings, which seemed to prohibit any genuine use. I looked at my son, who had evidently chosen this cold, beautiful woman over his own mother. You're right, I finally conceded. There are always options. I retrieved my small suitcase. Its weight felt considerably heavier now that I understood the unwelcome reception I had received. David stood, appearing uneasy, yet not sufficiently so to alter his decision. I'll call you in a few days, he said, as soon as you're settled somewhere. Don't trouble yourself, I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I wouldn't want to impose upon your sanctuary. Victoria exhibited a flicker of shame, but it was insufficient to prompt her to intervene, to utter, "Wait, this is wrong, she is your mother." I departed from that immaculate residence, with its perfect couple and their meticulously defined boundaries, and stood on the sidewalk for an extended period before I could compel myself to move. Through the front window, I could observe David and Victoria conversing, likely deliberating on my perceived difficult nature and the disruption I had introduced into their tranquil existence. The irony was not lost on me. For years after Robert's passing, I had convinced myself of my own strength and independence, believing I required no one. Now, in my moment of profound need, I discovered that independence is a luxury contingent upon having choices. I walked to a modest budget hotel situated on the corner and expended nearly all my remaining funds on a room for the night. Seated on the unyielding bed, gazing at the peeling wallpaper, I grappled with the daunting question of where a 65-year-old woman with minimal financial resources and a solitary suitcase of inexpensive clothing was to find her footing. It was then that I recalled the business card I had carried in my wallet for almost 40 years, miraculously preserved because it was with me at the time of the fire, its paper yellowed with age and softened from frequent handling. A card I had never genuinely anticipated using, from a man I had loved when the world felt young and all possibilities seemed within reach. Randall Galloway, the man who had once promised to return for me, a promise deferred by life's interventions, leaving that day perpetually unfulfilled. I spent 3 nights in that cheap hotel, grappling with physical discomfort and the gnawing taste of shame, before I mustered the courage to make the call. 3 nights of waking to the ache of a thin mattress and the cacophony of hallway arguments, punctuated by the incessant hum of traffic outside the poorly insulated window. 3 nights of washing my few new garments in the cramped bathroom and hanging them to dry on the room's solitary chair. The business card felt as delicate as tissue paper between my fingers, worn smooth by 4 decades of safekeeping yet never utilized. Randall Galloway was inscribed in faded blue ink, followed by a telephone number with an unfamiliar area code. On the reverse side, in my own youthful script, I had penned "Never forget G." I had written those words at the age of 25, possessed by the unwavering conviction of youth that Randall Galloway would be the singular love of my life. He was 26, with dark hair that often fell across his forehead and eyes the color of molten amber. After completing his studies, he joined his father's construction firm, harboring aspirations of grandeur, of constructing something of lasting significance. We dated for 9 months, an interval that, at 25, felt like an eternity. He would frequently take me to a scenic overlook outside the city, where we would sit on the hood of his car and discuss our future aspirations. "I'm going to establish my own enterprise," he would declare, his vision encompassing construction or real estate development, "something that will afford me the wealth to provide you with everything you deserve. I will return for you, Grace." He made this solemn promise the night before departing for a project in Atlanta. "I'm going to make something of myself, and then I'll come back and marry you." However, promises made at 25 often dissipate when confronted with the realities of life. Initially, he sent letters, lengthy and impassioned, filled with dreams and meticulous plans. I responded by detailing my position at the bank and my unwavering commitment to waiting, just as I had pledged. Gradually, the letters grew shorter, less frequent. When I met Robert 6 months later at a church gathering, Randall felt like a beautiful, ethereal dream, too perfect to be real. Robert was a man of steadfast character, reliable, already 32 years old with a secure position at the telephone company. He didn't promise me the moon, but he offered a home, a family, and security. Upon his proposal after a 5-month courtship, I accepted. I tucked Randall's business card into the pocket of my wedding dress, a secret talisman I couldn't bring myself to discard. Now, 40 years later, situated in a modest hotel room that carried the distinct scent of dampness and stale cigarette smoke, I pondered the fate of that dreamy young man with the amber eyes. I had sporadically kept abreast of his life over the years, much like one tracks a first love. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned he had indeed fulfilled his ambitions, establishing a successful construction company and achieving considerable recognition. His decision not to marry surprised many. He was always too occupied building his empire, they would remark, characterizing Galloway as perpetually driven. The last I heard, approximately 8 years ago, his company had expanded its operations beyond North Carolina, establishing a presence in Atlanta, Georgia, and Miami, Florida. Galloway Development, responsible for constructing shopping centers and office complexes. The young man from the construction firm had transformed into an individual who donned expensive suits and made decisions impacting hundreds of individuals. What conceivable interest could such a man have in a 65-year-old widow residing in a budget hotel with nothing more than a suitcase of clothing from a discount retailer? The rational part of my mind deemed the notion absurd, even pathetic. One does not contact a person after 40 years simply because their life has unraveled. One does not seek out their youthful love when they are elderly, desperate, and without recourse. However, rational thought becomes a luxury when one is meticulously counting the loose change in their purse, desperately trying to secure another night's lodging. On the fourth morning, my resolve finally wavered. My back ached from the unsupportive mattress. My funds were dwindling, and the hotel had already issued a warning that the room would be required for an incoming guest the following day. I sat at the small table in the room, my gaze fixed on the card, my hands trembling uncontrollably beyond the mere chill of the morning air. What would I even say? "Hello, Randall. Do you remember me? I'm homeless now. Can you assist me?" The number on the card was likely disconnected, or it would lead to a secretary who would politely inform me that Mr. Galloway was far too important to entertain calls from random women claiming a past acquaintance. But what if, just what if, he answered. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm as I dialed the number, each digit feeling like a step off a precipice. It rang once, twice. "Galloway Development, Randall here." His voice carried a newfound depth, shaped by the passage of time and the weight of obligations, yet undeniably his. After 4 decades, I would have recognized that familiar tone anywhere. I almost disconnected, nearly hitting the end call button to seek an alternative solution. But something in the inflection of his voice, a certain warmth that seemed to penetrate the phone line and envelop me like a comforting embrace, compelled me to speak. "Randall, it's Grace Thorne." "Well, my name is Grace Robert now, but I was formerly Thor." A silence stretched, long enough for me to wonder if the connection had failed, if he had terminated the call, or perhaps if he had no recollection of who I was. Then, "Grace," he simply said, my name uttered with a reverence, as if it were a whispered prayer or an expression of profound disbelief. "I'm so incredibly sorry to disturb you like this," I blurted out, my words tumbling forth in a rush, driven by a desperate need to explain myself before he could hang up. "I understand it's been a considerable amount of time and I likely shouldn't be calling, but I truly didn't know where else to turn." "Where are you?" he interjected, his voice now sharp with an immediate concern. "I'm in Charlotte, at a hotel called the Rest Stop. And I know this will sound utterly unbelievable, but my house was destroyed in a fire last week. I've lost absolutely everything, and my son doesn't wish for me to stay with him. I have nowhere to go." The words poured out in a relentless stream, each one heavier to articulate than the last. The admission that one's own child had cast you aside felt akin to confessing a fundamental failure in the very essence of human existence. "Provide me with the precise address," Randall commanded, his tone now shifting to one of pure professionalism. "I am coming to retrieve you." "You truly don't need to do that." I don't understand why I called. I suppose I simply felt the need to hear a familiar, friendly voice. "Grace." His tone conveyed an absolute finality, leaving no room for negotiation. "Tell me your location." "I am currently walking to my car," I replied. Through the phone, I could discern the distinct sound of a door closing, followed by the rumble of an engine igniting. He was actually coming. This man, with whom I had not exchanged a single word in 40 years, was apparently setting aside whatever pressing matters occupied his time to come to my rescue from a modest hotel. I gave him the address, my voice barely a whisper. "Randall, I must be clear. I am not the young woman you once knew." "Nor am I," he responded, and I could detect a distinct smile in his voice. However, I have been anticipating this call for 40 years. After we concluded our conversation, I spent the ensuing hour meticulously packing my meager belongings, my mind oscillating between a growing panic and sheer astonishment. What was I doing? What were we doing? This entire situation was preposterous. One could not simply re-engage a relationship after 4 decades, as if picking up a conversation from the previous day. Yet, as I gazed out the hotel window, awaiting the arrival of a vehicle I wouldn't recognize, driven by a man who might not even remember me, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced since before the inferno. Hope. Perhaps it was a misguided hope. Perhaps it would only lead to further disappointment and heartache, but it was nonetheless hope. And at 65 years of age, with nothing left to lose, hope felt like a risk worth taking. Precisely at 10:45, a gleaming silver Mercedes glided to a halt in front of the hotel, its polished surface a stark contrast to the weathered facade of the street. I peered out the window as the car settled into its parking spot, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird desperate for freedom. The windows were tinted, obscuring any view of the interior, but a profound intuition within me confirmed it was him. The engine silenced and the driver's side door swung open. Even after the passage of 40 years, even with the silver in his hair and the fine lines etched around his eyes, even bearing the accumulated weight of decades I had not shared with him, I recognized him instantly. Randall Galloway emerged from that vehicle as if stepping directly from the landscape of my dreams. And as his gaze met mine through the window where I stood, the intervening years seemed to dissolve between us, as though they had never existed. Clutching my suitcase, I descended the stairs with the urgent haste of someone who fears their cherished dream might evaporate if they delay for even a moment too long. He was waiting for me by the car. Randall exuded the same unhurried confidence he had possessed at 26, now refined and enhanced by success and maturity. He was dressed in dark denim and a navy blue sweater that likely cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. But his eyes, those captivating amber eyes that had occupied my thoughts for decades, remained precisely the same. I felt an overwhelming urge to retreat, to return to my room and pretend this entire encounter was nothing but a figment of my imagination. I felt I looked dreadful. My hair was long overdue for a cut. My inexpensive clothing was rumpled, and I felt insignificant and diminished compared to the elegantly composed man awaiting me. Yet he offered me a smile that sent my heart soaring as if I were 25 once more. I approached him slowly, finding myself suddenly incapable of drawing a full breath. "Hello, Grace," he murmured softly. I acknowledged the changes time had wrought. His once dark hair was now a distinguished salt and pepper, immaculately styled. Lines gracefully framed the corners of his eyes and curved around his mouth. His shoulders were broader, his presence more substantial, as if prosperity had lent him a tangible gravitas. But when he smiled, I saw the young man who had once taken me to the Overlook and confided his aspirations. "Hello," I managed to utter, my voice barely above a whisper. He studied my face for a prolonged moment, his amber eyes absorbing every detail. I longed to offer an apology for my appearance, for my diminished circumstances, for contacting him after all these years with nothing to offer but a litany of troubles. Instead, he uttered 3 words that irrevocably altered everything. "You look beautiful." Tears began to flow. Right there on the pavement in front of that modest hotel, with Randall Galloway standing beside me, I completely dissolved. 40 years of pent-up emotion, 4 days of acute uncertainty and despair. A lifetime of being made to feel inadequate. It all surfaced in uncontrollable ragged sobs. He remained silent, making no attempt to quiet me or offer platitudes. He simply took my suitcase with one hand and gently encircled me with his other arm as I leaned against his chest. He carried the subtle scent of expensive cologne and clean laundry, a fragrance of success and stability, of everything I had lost and everything I had never possessed. His sweater felt luxuriously soft against my cheek, and his arms were a reassuringly strong embrace around my trembling shoulders. "I'm so sorry," I choked out against his chest. "I'm sorry, Randall. I shouldn't have called. I shouldn't have burdened you with this predicament." "Shh," he murmured, his hand rhythmically stroking my back. "You should have reached out years ago." As my tears finally subsided, I drew back slightly, feeling a pang of embarrassment for the damp spot I'd left on his costly sweater. I must look like a complete mess. He reached out, his touch as delicate as a whisper, and gently wiped a tear from my cheek. "You look like someone who has endured immense hardship and emerged victorious. That, Grace, is not a disaster. It is resilience." I let out a shaky, bitter laugh. "Resilience? I'm 65 years old. I'm staying in a rundown hotel because my own son wants nothing to do with me. That's hardly resilience. It's pathetic." His jaw tightened perceptibly, and for a fleeting moment I glimpsed a flash of suppressed anger. "Your son is a fool. You don't know him." "I don't need to know him. I know you." He paused, his hand still resting lightly on my shoulders. "Or rather, I knew you, and the Grace Thorne I knew would never turn away someone in need, especially not family." The way he pronounced my maiden name, as if it were a cherished relic he had preserved, stirred a profound ache in my chest, a longing for the woman I once was. "That was a very long time ago," I said. "I am no longer that person." "Perhaps not," he conceded, "but I would very much like to meet the woman she has become." He placed my suitcase into the trunk of his opulent car, as if it contained something far more precious than a collection of my few remaining possessions. As he opened the passenger door for me, I felt a momentary wave of disbelief wash over me. On the morning of the fire, I had a home, a repository of memories, a life meticulously constructed over decades. Now I was entering the vehicle of a man I hadn't seen in 40 years, with absolutely no foreknowledge of what lay ahead. "Where are we headed?" I inquired as he started the engine. "Home," he replied simply. The journey lasted nearly an hour, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until we reached an area entirely unfamiliar to me. Rolling hills were adorned with estates concealed behind imposing stone walls and intricate iron gates. The trees appeared artfully placed, and the mailboxes seemed to boast a price tag, exceeding that of most people's automobiles. Randall turned onto a lengthy driveway, marked only by a modest brass plaque bearing the inscription Galloway. The driveway meandered through mature trees and meticulously cultivated gardens before opening into a grand circular entrance, before a residence that quite simply stole my breath away. It was not ostentatious or garish. Rather, it possessed an understated elegance that only true wealth can achieve, subtle, confident, and built to endure. Constructed of stone and wood, with soaring windows that captured the afternoon sun and a welcoming porch that beckoned one to linger, it was a monument to his accomplishments. "Randall," I whispered, gazing at this testament to his success. This is simply incredible." He parked the car but remained seated for a moment, observing the house as if seeing it through my astonished eyes. "It's rather large," he stated quietly. "It always has been. I built it with the intention of filling it one day, but—" He gestured with a shrug, a gesture so familiar it caused my heart to ache. "Some aspirations don't materialize as planned. You never married?" The question escaped my lips before I could exercise any restraint. He turned to face me, his expression inscrutable. I came close on a few occasions, but something was always absent. He paused briefly, then simply stated, "You." The word hung suspended between us in the profound silence of the car, charged with 40 years of unvoiced what ifs and could have beens. I yearned to inquire about his meaning, to comprehend how I could have been absent from a life I had never been a part of. But before I could articulate the question, he had already exited the vehicle, moving to open my door. The interior of the house was even more magnificent than its exterior suggested. Gleaming hardwood floors reflected the light like polished amber. Ceilings soared overhead, and the furnishings, while undeniably stylish and magazine-worthy, exuded a comfortable warmth rather than a sterile, museum-like ambience. Books were everywhere, with inviting reading chairs strategically placed near windows and photographs artfully scattered on end tables. It felt like a home inhabited by living beings, not merely a showcase of success. "Are you hungry?" Randall inquired, guiding me into a kitchen that dwarfed my former living room. "I was about to prepare lunch when you called." I realized with a jolt that I was ravenous. The hotel breakfast had consisted of little more than stale toast and weak coffee, and my stomach was beginning to knot with hunger and apprehension. "I don't wish to be a bother," I began, but he interrupted me with a look. "Grace, please stop. You are not a bother. You are—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You are the answer to a question I have been asking for 40 years. While he prepared our meal, demonstrating an unexpected culinary talent and moving with practiced ease around the spacious kitchen, I observed the photographs adorning the room. There was Randall at various ribbon-cutting ceremonies, clasping hands with prominent figures. There were images of him with different women at charity galas and business functions, always smiling but never appearing truly content. "Tell me about your life," he requested, placing a plate of perfectly grilled chicken and roasted vegetables before me. "Tell me about Robert, about your son, about all the moments I missed." And so I did. Over a lunch that tasted like a revelation after days of subpar hotel fare, I recounted my marriage to Robert, a steady, comfortable union that provided security and companionship, if not profound passion. I spoke of David, the son I had yearned for so desperately and loved with such fierce devotion, who had grown into a stranger, valuing his fiancée's comfort above his own mother's needs. I described the years of dutifully being a good wife, a good mother, a good widow, and then the devastating fire that had claimed all my possessions, followed by the son who had taken the last remnants of my spirit. Randall listened intently, his amber eyes never leaving my face. When I concluded, he remained silent for a long moment. "I am sorry," he finally stated. "I am sorry about Robert, about your home, about your son, but I am not sorry that you called me." "Why?" The question emerged softer than I had intended. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. It felt as strong, as gentle, and as capable of quickening my pulse as it had all those years ago. "Because I never stopped loving you," he said quietly. "Every deal I closed, every success I achieved, every dollar I earned, it was all in the hope of being worthy of you when you finally returned to me. Randall, I realize this sounds utterly outlandish. I understand that 40 years is an immense span of time, and we are profoundly different individuals now. But when I heard your voice on the telephone today, it felt as though a missing piece of my life had finally fallen perfectly into place." I looked down at our joined hands, his tanned and meticulously cared for, mine bearing the marks of labor and the undeniable passage of my 65 years. "I am not the girl you remember. You are better," he countered. "You are authentic. You have lived, loved, lost, and endured. That 25-year-old girl was lovely, but she was merely potential. You are the woman that potential evolved into." His words settled around my heart like a warm, comforting blanket, mending wounds I hadn't even realized were still tender. For the first time in memory, I felt truly seen, not as someone's mother or wife or a burden, but as myself. "What happens now?" I asked. Randall smiled, the same captivating smile that had ensnared me when the world was young. "Now we discover what the remainder of our lives look like together, if you'll have me." As I sat in his magnificent kitchen, surrounded by an abundance of good food and the palpable scent of possibility, I understood that sometimes the very fire that obliterates your old life is merely clearing the ground for the existence you were always destined to embrace. Living with Randall felt like rediscovering a facet of myself I had long forgotten. The initial week was characterized by a subtle awkwardness, a delicate dance around each other, akin to polite strangers sharing an unexpected proximity. He generously offered me the entirety of the guest suite within his sprawling home. This accommodation encompassed a room larger than my previous living space, a private bathroom equipped with a tub spacious enough for two, and a charming small sitting area overlooking his meticulously maintained gardens. I felt as though I were residing in a luxurious hotel, hesitant to touch anything or leave any trace of my presence. However, Randall exhibited a patient demeanor, a quality that successful individuals often cultivate. Gradually, I began to shed my inhibitions. He employed a housekeeper, Maria, who attended to the residents 3 days a week. But on the days she was absent, I found myself taking on the role of cook. It commenced modestly, with preparing morning coffee and simple midday meals. Yet, Randall expressed his appreciation with an enthusiasm that suggested a long period of reliance on buffet offerings and restaurant cuisine. "This is absolutely exquisite," he declared one evening, savoring the chicken and dumplings I had prepared using my grandmother's cherished recipe. "I haven't had a home-cooked meal like this in years." "It's quite simple, really," I demurred, though inwardly I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. When was the last time anyone had genuinely lauded my cooking? My son, David, used to lament my limited repertoire, and Victoria had once suggested I experiment with more contemporary flavors for our family gatherings. Randall, however, shook his head. "It's perfect. You are perfect." The word perfect should have instilled a sense of unease. I was 65, with visible grey roots, and the indelible lines of expression etched onto my face. My hands bore the marks of age, and my body had softened in areas that were once firm. By all objective measures, I was far from perfect, yet when Randall looked at me, I saw myself reflected in his eyes as someone beautiful, someone deserving of affection, attention, and tender care. We settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. We shared breakfast each morning on the rear veranda, where Randall would review business reports, while I observed the avian activity at his elaborate bird feeders. In the afternoons, we would embark on leisurely strolls around the expansive property, during which he would proudly showcase the gardens he had personally cultivated and the greenhouse where he indulged his passion for growing orchids. The evenings were dedicated to conversation. We had 40 years of shared experiences to bridge, and we approached this task with a slow, deliberate pace, much like archaeologists meticulously examining precious artifacts. I recounted the profound difficulty of losing Robert, the palpable emptiness of our home in the months that followed, the sheer effort required to rouse myself from bed each morning, and the pervasive loneliness of widowhood, a state that often renders one invisible to others once their husband is gone. He, in turn, shared details about his burgeoning business, which had transformed from a modest construction firm into a vast development empire with projects spanning 3 states. He spoke of the women he had dated over the years, intelligent, accomplished individuals who looked impeccable by his side at charity galas, but who never managed to make him feel truly complete. There was one woman, he confessed one evening as we sat beside his crackling fireplace, the rain drumming a soft rhythm against the windows. Eleanor, she was an architect, brilliant and beautiful. Everyone agreed we were a perfect match. I felt a pang of jealousy, the intensity of which surprised me. What transpired? I inquired, my voice barely audible. I proposed, he stated quietly, on Christmas Eve 5 years ago, a grand gesture at a restaurant overlooking the city skyline, a costly ring, all that she had ever desired, and she accepted. He continued, we set the wedding for the following summer, but as the date approached, I harbored a growing sense of unease, not about her, for she was everything one could wish for in a partner, but about myself. He paused, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. The night before the wedding, I called it off. Randall, no. What did you tell her? The truth, he replied, his eyes serious as he looked at me. That I was still in love with a woman I had met 40 years prior, and it would be profoundly unfair to marry her while my heart belonged elsewhere. His words struck me with the force of a physical blow. You cancelled your wedding, for me, for the memory of me, for the mere possibility that someday, somehow I might require your assistance, and you would be here, waiting. I gazed at this successful, handsome man, who could have had his pick of anyone, attempting to process the magnitude of his confession. This is absurd, I declared. It is, he agreed. He leaned forward, taking my hands in his. It's even more absurd that you kept my business card in your wallet for 40 years. He was right. We were both, undoubtedly, somewhat mad. We had both been living with the spectre of what might have been. Yet, somehow, against all odds, our unique brand of madness had brought us back together. 3 weeks after my arrival, David initiated contact. I was in Randall's kitchen preparing dinner and humming softly to myself. Actually, humming, something I hadn't done in years, when my phone chimed. David's name on the screen caused my stomach to clench with a familiar anxiety. Hello, dear, I said, striving for a neutral tone. Mum. His voice was peculiar, carefully modulated. I've been attempting to reach you. Your phone has been going directly to voicemail. That was indeed true. I had been deliberately screening my calls, not yet prepared to confront any potential guilt or obligation David might try to impose. I've been occupied, I replied. Occupied with what? I understand you checked out of the hotel weeks ago. Where are you residing? I surveyed Randall's magnificent kitchen, the vibrant fresh flowers he had brought home that morning, the elegant wine glasses resting on the counter. I am staying with a friend. What friend? Mum, you don't have friends with substantial means, do you? His assumption stung, partly because it had been a harsh reality for so long after Robert's passing. I had allowed most of my friendships to dwindle, feeling too weary and too proud to sustain relationships when I had little to offer in return. Would you be surprised? I retorted coolly. A beat of silence followed, and I could practically sense him processing this unexpected information. Mum, I believe we need to have a conversation. Victoria and I have been discussing the situation, and we've concluded that perhaps we were overly hasty. Perhaps you could stay in our guest room for a period, simply until you regain your footing. The offer that would have meant the world to me just a month prior now felt hollow, even insulting. What prompted this change of heart? Another pause ensued. We realized that perhaps we were overly focused on our own needs. Family must stick together. What he truly meant, I surmised, was that he had likely gleaned from neighborhood gossip that his mother was no longer residing in a budget hotel. Someone had apparently spotted her in the company of a well-dressed gentleman in an expensive vehicle. David was motivated by curiosity, and curiosity in turn had made him generous. "That is exceptionally kind of you," I stated. "However, I am quite content with my current arrangements." "Mum, you cannot simply move in with a stranger. It is not safe. What do you even know about this individual?" "He's never made me feel like a burden," I confessed softly. "He truly cherishes my presence, delights in my culinary creations, and assures me of my beauty daily." This wedding was a world apart from my first. When I wed Robert 4 decades ago, it was dictated by external expectations. A traditional white gown, a solemn church ceremony, followed by a reception at the local hall, complete with a disc jockey and a cash bar. We extended invitations to every acquaintance, even those we barely tolerated, simply because it was the norm. We performed the ceremony as a public spectacle, not a personal commitment. This time, Randall and I orchestrated precisely as we envisioned. The ceremony unfolded in his backyard on a brisk November morning, 5 months after that pivotal hotel call. Randall's longtime friend officiated, and our sole witnesses were Maria, our devoted housekeeper, and Marcus, Randall's business associate and closest confidant for 25 years. I wore a simple azure dress that Randall said mirrored my eyes, while he donned a charcoal suit that lent him an air of distinction and charm. No pretenses, no grand displays, no pressure to impress. Just two souls who had rediscovered each other after a lapse of 40 years, vowing to share whatever time remained. David did attend the wedding. I'd wrestled with the decision of whether to extend an invitation, but Randall persuaded me to offer him another opportunity. "He is your son," he stated plainly. "You will have regrets if you deny him a chance to rectify things." Thus, I contacted him 2 weeks prior to the ceremony. "Randall and I are to be married," I announced matter-of-factly. "November the 15th at 2 o'clock. You are welcome to attend, though Victoria is not." He arrived alone, appearing out of his element, in a suit that likely surpassed my monthly food budget. He offered Randall a polite handshake. He engaged in pleasantries and even managed a peculiar smile, as the officiant pronounced us man and wife. Yet I perceived the avarice in his gaze, the manner in which he surveyed Randall's home, his vehicle, the undeniable indicators of affluence. This morning, I awoke nestled in Randall's embrace, in the arms of my husband, in the chamber that became ours, in the residence that has become our shared haven. Sunlight cascaded through the windows overlooking the gardens we cultivate together, and I detected the aroma of the coffee Randall prepares each morning before my eyes open. At 66 years of age, I experience a profound happiness, exceeding any I've known. This contentment stems not from Randall's wealth, his elegant home, or his achievements, but from the fact that someone perceives me, truly sees me, and chooses to embrace what he observes. The fire obliterated my former existence. It consumed it, reducing it to embers. However, occasionally, as I observe Randall engrossed in his morning paper across our breakfast table, I reflect that destruction can be synonymous with rebirth. Sometimes one must relinquish all that one believed to be desired to discover that which is genuinely needed. And at times, if one is exceptionally fortunate, a first love is granted a second chance to blossom into an eternal bond. The business card I safeguarded for 40 years is now elegantly framed, gracing Randall's desk in his study. It serves as a testament to the enduring value of certain pledges, even when their fulfillment requires 4 decades. Did you find the narrative engaging? And from which city are you absorbing this tale? Let us connect in the comments section. Should this story resonate with you, your support via a super thanks would be greatly appreciated, enabling me to continue sharing such narratives. Thank you profoundly for your generous support. I eagerly anticipate your thoughts on the story. On your screen, 2 new life chronicles are presented, which I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of additional content. Remember to subscribe. Until our next life story, I extend my love and respect. Did you find the narrative engaging? And from which city are you absorbing this tale? Let us connect in the comments section. Should this story resonate with you, your support via a super thanks would be greatly appreciated, enabling me to continue sharing such narratives. With love and respect,